Instead of going live in my Creative Memorial Planning Facebook group, I wanted to feature one of my Creative Memorial Planning members who is incredibly experienced with dealing with end of life scenarios. Her name is Anna Adams. And we were just talking a little bit about the fact that she works in two different hospice facilities. And first of all, I just want to say welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for being the guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I love our little chats that we get to do every once in a while. It's nice to catch up.
And you've really helped me learn. I know that many members in my Creative Memorial Planning group don't know, like I didn't know, that there are such things as transition or end of life or death doulas. And please tell me, first of all, tell me a little bit about the two places that you work and how exciting. One of them has an exciting first that you just mentioned to me before we got on here.
Yes, so I'm actually working with a large hospice company, and we have an inpatient unit as well as we do patients outside in the field at their homes, and so that I work as there with them, and then I am with a hospice company here in San Antonio, Texas, which we are the first hospice company in San Antonio to have a doula on staff. So yay, it's awesome. I was so excited. We actually got to share with our families about that at our yearly memorial service that we held last month. And so it is just so excited to be, and it's got a wonderful name because it totally ties into end of life doula, what we do. It's called Holistic Care Hospice here in San Antonio.
Holistic, keyword. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
congratulations. That is incredible. And I just wanted to mention that before we go any further today in talking about what a doula does and the exciting things that you as a doula have to offer, people, whether they're looking to incorporate that or really feel a calling to that kind of work. I know
mhm.
there are both of those kinds of members in the Creative Memorial Planning group. Um, but it's a huge movement now that's really starting to catch some momentum, and I'm just really thrilled about it. And so I'm really excited to have you as a guest. Really, my kind of desire is to really educate the people in my group that this exists, and
Mhm.
that key word that you just mentioned in the facility where you work, it's so holistic, which is kind of what I'm all about in my approach to creative memorial planning. So I wanted to I know we've talked before, and I want people to know that Anna and I are getting to be best buds because we talk all the time about stuff now. And I have featured her in previous interviews. So if you haven't seen that yet, go check out the units section in the Creative Memorial Planning Facebook group, or you can just search in my group Doula, and you'll find Anna in my interview with her, and you'll learn more about kind of how her story and how she got kind of involved with this kind of work. Excuse me. But um, it just really resonates with me because, as you know, I'm going to be really clear for the people that are new to my group. I help people pre-plan alternatives to traditional funeral plans. And why I advocate that is to be much more planet friendly, much more pocketbook friendly than the traditional ways. And the reason I'm incorporating doulas and educating my group and myself about doula work is because, to me, that is such a much more personalized and gentle approach than the old traditional customs that we're all kind of accustomed to just relying on in the
Used to, yeah.
scare of the moment of a loss. So very excited to kind of let people know what a doula does. And then we're going to go in a little bit further into this at the end of this interview, or halfway through at least. I would love for Anna to then share some really exciting things that she's got coming up for people that are interested in this kind of work. It's just, she's got an amazing thing coming up. So sorry, it's hard to contain my excitement about you, Anna.
Thank
But
you.
can you let me go into just a scenario just to give my members and myself kind of an idea of what it would look like if I wanted to incorporate a doula into end of life plans. So, and again, pardon my allergies. Um, so for myself, you know, I don't want to burden my family members because I'm not married yet. So if anyone's listening and you think I'm cute, I'm still available. So I'll put that out there. But if seriously, if I'm not married, if I don't have a partner by then and I'm single, I don't have children, never did. Um, I don't want to burden my surviving loved ones
Mhm.
in my end of life scenario. So that's something I really take seriously when I put together my end of life plan. And I've incorporated into my plan the use of an end of life doula for that purpose. Also, because I don't really want to be alone, because maybe I'll be the only one left at that time. And
Right.
like you said this to me at one time, I don't think anyone should be alone, in that moment. So let's put that scenario out there. Let's pretend like, just to give people an idea of what a doula would do. Let's say that let's paint a picture. I'm either have a fatal illness, or I'm at an end of a ripe old age of my life, and I've got my maybe either hospice has come in, or it looks like I have maybe a couple of weeks left, to be in existence, and I've put this into my plan that I want a doula to be there. Can you give us an idea, just and I know it varies per person, but what would I expect what would myself or my surrounding family members expect pre-death when I'm at the end of my life? What would we expect on a typical day from a doula if I used those services?
Yeah, so a doula will come in. We like to try to come in as early as possible, just because we like to get to build up a trust with our families, with our patients. Um, that way we can come in, and if there's any little things that need to be taken care of, maybe, if they have a loved one that they need to talk to or share something with, letting all those get the business finished, the unfinished business finished, so that that when they transition into their imminent stage and they're in their sleeping stage, they'll be able to be at peace and have less anxiety. Um, so coming in as early as we can is what we try to do, but sometimes it doesn't happen. So if we come in later in the time, that's when we start. I have to watch, engage the family, also the patient, because sometimes the patients, giving them the information at such a pace where it's not overwhelming, discussing maybe things that they might experience as they're going through the imminent stage. Um, a lot of times patients or clients are not alert at that time, when we get into those, days. But then there's some patients that, are that one day they have this burst, and they're talking and they're interacting with all their family.
That would be
And
me.
then and then a few hours, I've seen it a few hours later, or even 24 hours later, 48 hours later, they just take a totally different downhill, where they're sleeping, they're not waking up. Um, they may or may not need a little oxygen added in. So, and like you said too, bringing up a point that sometimes there's a lot of patients that don't have families. Maybe they're the last of their family, so they'll bring in a doula, and a doula, will sit. I like to call them our vigils. Sit bedside vigil with them, to be there, so that if they see something, maybe they see that they're having a little trouble breathing, then we can contact hospice and meet with hospice. Let them know, hey, we're the doula. This is what we do. We're going to be your eyes and ears. And
Right. I want to interject on that. This is great. This is really helpful. Can you, since you mentioned hospice, can you point out to myself and my members watching here, what's the difference between what a hospice worker does and what a doula would do for me at that stage?
well, okay, so hospice unfortunately cannot be at the home or at the facility that you're in 24/7. A lot of people have that misunderstanding, that they think, oh, well, hospice gives 24 hours care. Well, they do, but it's sending in a nurse. You have a team. You have your nurse, you have the doctor, you have your social worker, you have your chaplain, and you possibly will have a home health aide. The home health aide may come in 2 or 3 times a week. The nurse may come in once, twice a week. Chaplain services may come in once, depending on what you request, because you can request more visits if you like. Social workers, same thing. So the doula, though, is there. We don't have that time constraint to say that we can only go in and visit so many times a week. We set that up with the client. So if the client wants us there every day, well, if our schedules allow it, we can work that out or whatever. We'll come in every day. So it's really because of hospice, they have tons of patients and things going on with, and the
Right.
Medicare and Medicaid and all the wonderful insurances don't really allow anything extra long. Some
Right.
hospices do offer crisis care, but crisis care is only assigned for the client if they have a symptom, an unmanaged
Right.
symptom.
And a recorded
Right.
symptom by the
So
medical staff. Yeah.
if they're
Yeah.
having agitation, can actually be one of them. Restlessness,
Right.
pain. I've seen a lot of times respiratory distress. So those items, but once those symptoms are managed, the staff can no longer stay there 24/7.
So one of the biggest differences between the hospice, the incorporation of hospice staff for support and doula work is bureaucracy, that you're not tied to that kind of bureaucratic red tape of a limitation of time for support from that. But what's another key difference between a hospice worker and a doula worker for me at the end of my life
I like to
scenario?
think of end of life doulas as patient advocates. We will advocate. We will discuss with you and find out. That's why, again, we like to try to come in a little early if we can, but try to find out what your wants and needs are, so that when you're unable to speak and get those needs voiced, we can be your voice.
I
And I
love
think
that.
that's a really big, important key to have someone to be able to say, I need this, or this patient needs that. So we can
Right.
call them and hopefully we've had some time to develop a little bit of a relationship with the hospice so that they know, oh, you know what, when they call, um, just like my nurses that I work with, they know if I'm calling them about a sign or a symptom that I'm seeing, they know right away, okay, yeah, Anna knows what she's talking about. Anna's
Right.
done this. She's seen this. She's worked with patients. And sometimes I have a little bit better rapport with the family because I am there so much more than they are. And I can let them
Right.
know, hey, I've seen this, or, and sometimes too, families and patients, they don't want to be a bother, even if they have a service like hospice that is involved. They don't want to be a bother, or they feel like, so that's when we can say,
Yeah.
no, you know what, it's okay, go ahead and let hospice know
Right.
what's going on.
And I think also having my understanding is, or maybe you can clear this up for me, that not only would a doula kind of get to know the patient ideally a little bit early in the scenario so that it's not last minute, which is hard on everyone, and which is why I strongly promote pre-planning. But a doula can also, if, for example, my family members know me really well, so they know what I want and what I don't want, and they would be able to communicate that as well to the doula, so that if the doula is kind of sitting in, um, what I'm getting at is often the family members know that person really well, and they can help inform the doula on,
Mhm.
little intricacies like that. Is that
Yeah, and
correct?
sometimes too, the
You,
families just build up that trust with us. So they'll call
yeah,
us and say, "Hey, we're seeing this or that," and I'll tell them, "Yes, we need to go ahead and call hospice and let them know about this," or we need to
yeah.
you need to request a nurse visit, and get
That's
somebody in
it,
there.
having a doula is so it's like a third party, kinda like having a celebrant at a memorial. It takes the load off of everyone else that's really under the emotional duress of dealing with the gradual loss of a
Exactly.
loved one or the deterioration of someone, and so you being there, it's just a emotional buffer, and because of the expertise and the experience you have, you can, put their minds at ease
Hmm.
basically about that. I wanna ask another question though, this is great because I think it helps people kind of imagine that scenario and help them decide, do they want to incorporate a doula in their end of life plan. like I'm doing. The other question I have is like when we, as you mentioned, you and I do a similar overlapping service in that we both do help people pre-plan their end of life scenarios. And this is what you would do ideally early on with someone, I do it like now, like I want people to do it now. Like I don't care how old you are or how healthy you are. My experience is with tragedies, it's so important. I don't care how old you are just to get it done. But talk about that more later. But in your working with your clients, you mentioned that kind of scenario. Do you do any help with their legacy documents, as in legal documents or health directives and things like that, if you're called early enough to work with them on that?
Yes, so I personally do. Now, there are some doulas that maybe only work at end of life or maybe just do end of life and companion. Some don't want to work with the paperwork, but some do. So I do. But there's still some things, I can always refer out sometimes to others to get, more
Okay.
assistance on if I need it.
That's a good point that I wanted to bring up, that, it's so important to know that I'm having trouble with my technology. Sorry. It's so important to know that doulas are as unique as your end of life plan can be. And that's
Hmm.
the point that I tried to stress, in that you're saying that, you really, that's the remarkable thing to me about it, that you need to find someone who has the expertise and whose energy you feel really comfortable with, because people do things differently and they offer different types of services. That's an important thing to kind of discuss. I'm glad you
Right.
brought that out. And then the other question I wanted to ask is just to give people a kind of a scenario. Like, let's say that all my plans are kind of done and I've worked out, how I want my remains to be handled, whether that's cremation or a natural burial with a shroud, or a natural casket in a natural burial site, or a green cemetery. Um, I don't go anywhere near the traditional thing. That's who I am, and that's what I advocate. But for these kinds of scenarios, would a doula be involved in any way with preparing the body for transport for that sort of thing? What's your role in that,
So
if any?
doulas can help, but unfortunately, there's a line that we have to volunteer that time. Anytime that we're cleansing the body, dressing the body, that kind of prep work has to be done completely volunteer based, due to laws and regulations. So that allows a little time, but yes, we can also, yes, we can also take part in coming in and helping the family, whether they have, however they set up the transport and getting the loved one to the site. We can help in any way. Like I said, it's some doulas do, some doulas don't. Every
It's
doula is
unique.
different.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so
good
it's
to
always
know.
important as you're doing that intake, um, when you're meeting with your potential doula, talk to them and ask them what they do and don't do. Because like I said, not everybody does the same. Um, I'm kind of like a one stop shop, and I like to, cover everything with my families. Because my families and we become close,
Right.
and I build that relationship with them. So I like to follow through, and then also following up afterwards for bereavement. So,
Oh, that's good. Good news. Yeah.
so yeah, so we have, so everybody does it differently.
Right.
Um, and so it's really important when you are talking to a doula and getting talking about maybe putting a doula into your end of life
Clarifying.
plan, talk to them and ask them what they do not cover, do they do the advanced
Right.
paperwork? Some only do like a DNR and advanced directive. Um,
Okay.
and then that's it. So it
Okay.
just depends. Everybody's very different.
It's good to know. And just to clarify my service, I don't handle the legal or the health directives, but I do help every detail about the end of life plan, how to handle the remains, finding those alternatives, and getting all of that set up. And if you want to include a doula, I would help you, kind of navigate these questions to make sure you're getting the kind of doula service you want. So I just want people to know and be aware that there are alternatives. You don't have to hand over a major chunk of money to a traditional, funeral corporation. You
Hmm.
can have things done in a much more gentle way that's more in sync with the loved one or your personal values. And I think having the doula there is such a gentle, personal, really supportive way to do that. I want to ask one last question about this kind of scenario. I just want to kind of give people an idea of what it would be like for me to have a doula involved. So this is very helpful, I
Sure.
think, for people to think about. So let's say that, of course, you're in Texas and I'm in Kentucky, so your service would not be one that I personally would choose to incorporate, but I have that in my service. And let's say that I have two different kind of goodbye rituals that I want to do. One is an in-home, very intimate, which is very appropriate right now for the pandemic,
Hmm.
because I can't tell you how many people I've heard from who have lost a loved one this year, and there's no service yet, except for a quiet in-home thing because of the risk of the COVID exposure. But even if that weren't the case, in my case, I like the idea of having an in-home, quiet goodbye ritual with just my closest family, and then
Hmm.
later having a larger service. So if you were my doula, and after I passed away, and you were involved in those end of life plans, what would we expect, what my family expect from you in terms of an in-home goodbye ritual scenario?
So typically after a loved one passes, we have a certain amount of time that we're allowed to keep the body at the home. And so once, I would have to get with them and talk to them and see what their plans were.
Well, let
I
me
will
let me
say,
interrupt you on that. Sorry, but you said, and this is very something that people need to know. I just want to hound on this, but sorry, interrupted you. But
no,
you don't have to have a corporate funeral person whisk the body out the same day
no.
that there's been a death. You can have it, depending on the state and the situation with funeral directors, and their legalities, you can have the body in the home for up to 5 days in many places. 3 days, you could have a 3-day vigil type scenario. I just want to kind of chime in there so they know what that means. And it will
And it,
vary a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, by states and things. And so it's best to pre-plan this. This is something that, it's difficult to put together if it's like a week notice
Right.
kind of thing.
There's paperwork
Um,
that has to be done.
right. And so, so we would have to get together, pre-plan that, and I like having to know who is taking care of what, who is going to be decorating, who is going to be putting this stuff together, having an organization to know exactly who's doing everything so that when the time comes, anything that can't be done beforehand, that has to be done after the patient passes, then we all know what our jobs are and what we need to do so that everything can run smoothly. And I think too, when families all partake into this, it really helps with their bereavement process. It really, really does. It really
Wholeheartedly agree.
helps,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I,
everybody
I,
usually that I've seen, that a couple ones that I've done, that people just feel at peace.
yeah, that I'm glad you brought that up because, I have, of course, I talk about this with everybody I know because, as you know, I've lost people suddenly. This year, I lost another friend
Oh,
who lost her battle with cancer, and a high school friend let me know that she lost both of her parents within a week last December, this past month.
oh my
And
goodness.
I hear people say, you know, I'm not going to plan anything. It's no big deal. Just, deal with my remains and that be done with it. And I understand that. I appreciate where they're coming from. They don't want a big hoopla done about them. They're very humble about it. But the
Mhm.
fact is, what you just mentioned, I've seen this over and over again, that when you have any kind, and that can be as personally tailored as you want it to be, but any kind of goodbye ritual, in-home, quiet, intimate one, or an outdoor thing, or a public thing, or something at a religious facility, or at a park, or you can rent a space. Depends on what you want to do, but any kind of goodbye ritual that's been put together and planned, it really does go a long way to comfort surviving loved ones and to help them in their grieving process. It's not going to get rid of the grief in any way,
Oh yeah,
but
no.
yeah, but the things that I've been through, I am so much closer to all the people that I went through those losses with in our goodbye
Mhm.
rituals. We are able to grieve openly, and we are understood by others who are grieving.
Mhm.
You know, we're all grieving differently, of
Exactly.
course, but what that point is just something I really wholeheartedly support, that being there for people and letting them have some means of closure or a way to tribute somebody goes a long way with helping them grieve. And I'm just thinking about, if someone I cared about died and they had no goodbye ritual, I'm left on my own, and grieving on your own with no real kind of ritual, whatever that may be, it's harder. Wouldn't you
Mhm.
agree with that from
Oh,
what
I
you've seen?
definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
And
something.
unfortunately too, sometimes with family patients that don't have families, maybe they're their last
Exactly.
loved one, you know, having a doula with them
Yeah.
helps them to be at peace as well,
That's what I'm
you
thinking.
know?
Yeah, when you're single, and I see this so much. I see so many of my mom, because I'm my mom's caregiver, and we're watching elders pass away. She's like the youngest of this big clan of elder people, but you watch them all the time passing away, and you know that they're all going to be gone when you're gone, and that
Yeah.
can be a very. Of course, we all go out by ourselves anyway, where whatever your beliefs are. But in that
Yeah.
moment, I think the idea of having the services of a doula, just a human connection, and the warmth and compassion that people like Anna, like you bring to this scenario, such a noble, warmth and heart to heart connection that can't be anything but comforting for anybody on that edge of, the dying experience. So I just
Mhm.
want that to be really, really clear to my audience of what the value of this kind of service would be to someone. So